don't need to get over it. So yeah, but that's good. I'm glad. Okay, cool. So welcome, Krzysztof. Thank you so much for
Glad to be
coming.
here.
This is our second episode of How Much Time Do You Have? But it is kind of like we're going to link the episodes essentially in a way
Hmm.
because
Right.
we'll introduce the topics that we started by. Today we're going to be talking about which we will not cover entirely, of course, in the
Mm.
course of this podcast, but we're going to be talking about the sacred and profane space specifically. And this was kind of the how do you say, like, this is like the chapter two or the attaché to the first episode where we were talking about the DJing and parties, Catholic
Exactly.
DJing, Catholic partying, and whether or not, we were trying to figure out for ourselves, okay, well, how do you define sacred space? Like, how is it that, what should sacred space look like? Specifically within the Catholic context, of course, how does, we have now Father Guillem, who's a
Mm.
Brazilian or Portuguese priest.
Guilherme, and he's
Okay.
Portuguese.
Okay, there you go. Gotcha. Got it. So sorry, Father, for butchering the name. I got Christoph here to help me with that. And
I
with
mean, I might be butchering it too because I speak Brazilian Portuguese with a Brazilian accent, but there's that.
but either way, like the idea is that the idea is that we want to it's a I think it's a valid question to ask, right? Because there
Definitely.
is the church has always the church has never been absent of culture. In many ways, it has fostered a lot of culture over the ages, and has been
Hmm.
integral in has played an integral part in it. And so we started by basically asking, okay, well, will if you have these DJ, if you have can you rave outside of a church, essentially?
Right.
And is that to is that kosher, to borrow a term from
Right.
from our Jewish brothers? So what do you think? What are some initial thoughts? Let's recap a little bit from last time,
Right.
and what are some initial thoughts that you had?
Mhm. Right. So when it comes to the initial thoughts, I would say there is a very fine line between reaching out to people who might be outside of the church and outside of the culture and just straight up catering towards
Mm,
them.
mm,
And how now there's, like I said, there's a fine line, and you need to strike this balance between
mm,
being open, between reaching out, as I said, and maybe I guess including some elements which might be familiar to people you're trying to reach, while at the same time not losing your identity and making sure you don't, well, how would I say this? Make sure, how do you make sure you keep sacred sacred and separate it from the profane? Because in certain settings, as in concerts, as in whatever is outside of the church, I would say I'm all for it. I actually thought it was pretty awesome. Uh, Mostly because in this setting, uh, you are outside of the temple, uh, and I guess gives you a lot more space to be a bit more free in your expression and the ways you're trying to communicate and so on. Whereas, of course, that really wouldn't, a DJ set definitely wouldn't be a suitable thing to do at a Catholic mass.
right.
Uh, in fact, it is the sacred space. It's holy, and even if we look at the word holy, which would be kadosh in Hebrew, like if we go back to the book of Isaiah, there's this hymn of the seraphim, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts."
Right.
That word actually appears there, the word
Right.
kadosh. And what does holy mean? Well, of course, we do have our modern day idea of holiness as moral perfection. We have a strong, I guess, association of holiness with moral perfection. And well, there is truth to that. However, if we were to look at it from a more traditional way, or what it actually meant in the Bible, holy means set apart.
Mm,
Means it means different. It means set apart. It means something that is different from the rest, different from the ordinary,
mm,
right? The
mm, mm.
profane, which once again we have to look at the definitions. But the way we're going to use the word profane is not going to be in the modern sense, as in profane, as lowly as I would like to say vulgar, but then again, vulgar used to mean simply mean common
Right,
back in the
right,
day.
right,
So
right,
that's how the definition shifted over the years.
right.
Profane simply means ordinary, means worldly, whereas nowadays, of course, we would associate it with something that's just lowly, something that's unbecoming of well, the setting, and well, not only that. So yeah, I guess that's a pretty important distinction we need to make at the beginning. If you want to discuss an issue, first you need to establish the definitions.
Of course, yeah, definitely. And I think I'm already very grateful just for the conversation. I hope people listening also will appreciate that. That's actually something that is altogether too lost, or I have noticed, is becoming more and more uncommon in everyday conversations, where it's like people are making it is so much easier to do assumptions than or to sorry to make assumptions about what people think about what how people define terms, as opposed to taking the timing and saying, okay, hey, listen, wait, how what do you mean by this? Right? Like, what
100%.
exactly do you mean by this? All right, so you say this term, it's like, okay, but this is how I this is what it means to me. Are we do we agree on these terms? And I imagine that if people just actually establish terms from more clearly from the beginning, that a lot of misunderstanding could be avoided. But of course, that requires time, that requires patience. That is not a 15-second Instagram or TikTok reel.
Exactly.
And so it's we're at our ability to have such conversations is in decline. But that's why I'm rebelling with such a podcast like
Oh,
this.
it is.
Yeah.
As well as you need willingness to actually understand your interlocutor's point of view.
Right, right, or exactly. That's exactly it. And so, I wanted to kind of build off of what you were saying. I think we will define terms as we go along, right? So people don't kind of get
Sure
overwhelmed,
thing.
and so we don't get overwhelmed. I wanted to discuss how this the one of the first instances that comes to mind within the scripture, of course, about sacred and profane space is the scene of the burning bush, right? You have the Lord appearing to Moses, and he tells Moses, "Take off the sandals from your feet, for you are
Yes.
on holy ground," right? And so this to me is, I think, something that we can kind of the first instances that we can cleave to, that we can use as like a milestone, a mile marker, because a lot of the times also I think people will lose will lose kind of this idea, right? It's like, okay, well, so but it's a building, right? It's like it's a building, it's just a building, and it's just a rail, and it's just an altar, right? It's like you just
Mm,
they'll put the term put the term just like right in just in
mm,
front of the word and be like, okay, it's just the thing, right? It's like, but is it? But is it?
hmm
And so one of the things that I just kind of want to introduce here, again, maybe you've got something to add with this, is that it's just that the for the if we are, which we believe to be, right, the inheritors of the Old Testament, and all that implies, can we say that hey, listen, there's this instance where clearly when God is communicating with man, there is a cutting out of space, right? There is a breaking through of space, that whatever we're inhabiting, God sanctifies with his presence. you know?
Oh, definitely. And there's a lot of instances of it in the Old Testament. Well, for example, the burning bush is one of the examples. Then, as Moses stepped on a mount, the mount became surrounded with clouds, which are once again the sign of God's presence. And Moses was talking to God directly while the Israelites were waiting for him to come down and give them, well, the instructions and so
Right.
on. Then, as the Israelites were traveling through the desert, uh, of course, you had the tent where Moses would talk to God. Once again, it was well, because they were basically going through as I said, they were traveling. They were living a nomadic life at the time.
Right. Right.
But in even such provisoric conditions, they set up this place to communicate with God, this separate place where Moses would speak to God. Then, of course, you had the temple, and in the temple, you had the Holy of Holies, right? The place where the Israelites placed the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
Also, the Holy of Holies could be accessed only once a year by the high priest
Right.
on Yom Kippur. And so, yeah, there's a lot of these instances where
Right.
whenever you encounter such well, in pretty much any form of cult or most forms of cult in all religions
Right.
across the world and history have a certain designated space for worship, a space that's different from the ordinary.
Right.
And that's what we should always keep in mind. And nowadays, in every church, you have the Blessed Sacrament
Right.
where God is present. So,
Right.
once again,
What would you say to, again, playing devil's advocate a
mhm,
little bit here?
sure.
What would you say to, let's say, a Protestant brother or sister that says, "Well, I can just, I can just sit here and like raise my hands to the sky and like be in the presence of God." Like, what is it? What is maybe a little nuance that we need to kind of understand there?
hmm Well, I would say, and I would probably make reference to everyday situations. There is a time and place for everything, for sure. And just from daily life situations, we can see there is a time and place for everything, and certain places, certain people we meet
Right.
require us to behave and act a certain kind of way. There is a dress code. There are situations where we can be a lot more casual, for example, when we're speaking to friends. However, in a business setting, you would use a much more refined, a much more official language.
Right.
You'd speak in a much more sophisticated way, and the same rule applies to the way we live our faith. Whereas when you worship God privately, uh, or praise God privately at home, uh, you are free well, you have a lot more freedom of expression. Let's put it that way. However, the church, which is a sacred place, and I believe, and as we Catholics believe, where God is present in the Eucharist, that requires us to also, well, tone it down with our personal
Mm.
way of expressing our devotion and well submit ourselves to the objective rather than going off of our subjective feelings.
Right. 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 There's a what's coming to mind right now is, is again, some people will say, "Oh, but again, I'm playing devil's advocate here," and it's
hmm
kind of this whole thing where it's like, "Oh, well, what, there's a why, what, how is it that, like, what does God care about, like, how I dress up? Like, why can't I, doesn't, isn't God happy with the fact that I just show up at all? Why does he care if I show up, dressed in a suit and tie, or whether I show up in jeans and a t-shirt, and it's interesting because the thing that the thing that comes to mind immediately, again, to kind of counter that, is that yes, yes, it's true. I'm
Hmm.
curious what you think. Yes, I think it's true that God cares that you're present to begin with, right? Like, at all, right?
Sure.
So if all you can muster, or is jeans and a t-shirt, or if it's like 90 degrees outside and you're
Mm,
in, like, Guadalajara, Mexico, and the defining factor between you going to mass and not going to mass is jeans and a t-shirt, then by all means go to mass, right? Like,
exactly.
that's the right, that, like, just have a little, have some common sense to discern it. However, I'm reminded of, again, another early scene in the scripture where we look at the sacrifices offered by Cain and Abel, right? And the fact that Abel offered a sacrifice that was pleasing to God. Cain offered something that was not pleasing to God. And it was not pleasing to God, not because of not because of this of its in of the inherent goodness of the things that he offered, but from the position where his heart was upon offering them, right?
Right.
And so it's
That's the
one of
most
those.
common that's the most common interpretation given by the church fathers and different theologians over the years.
Right, right, exactly. And I mean, again, there's a certain, I think one of the things that I think we can one of the things that I also want to encourage people, I'm constantly encouraging people to do. One of the reasons that I started this is because we're not just contrary to popular opinion, we're not just the Christian religion, let's say the Catholic religion, the Catholic and
Mhm.
Orthodox faiths are not like, hey, put your blinders on, just be like stupid mules and, like, go work and, give money to the church. And, like, it's like, no, it's the total opposite. It's like, we're the faith of Augustine and Aquinas, and, the massive, there's always been this inquisitive nature, this inquisitive side of things, this idea that the faith and intellect are not mutually exclusive. So by all means, test it and ask it and go after it, but also look to the past, because guess what? You probably, if you have a question regarding the faith, you're probably not the first one to ask it. And so
Definitely.
the fathers and the saints have searched, certainly had their own thoughts and contributions, and they were probably much more versed than you were. So, like, have a little humility, and at least
Definitely.
prove them wrong before you go off and telling everybody, well, this is what I think. It's just like, nobody cares what you think. So
Oof.
yeah, yeah. I think one of the. I think Eleanor Roosevelt said this. She was like, if people realized if more people knew how little people think about them, they would live in less fear. It's just like
Mm,
everyone's constantly thinking,
right.
it's like, oh, what's this person gonna say, or what are they gonna say? It's just like, they're probably not even thinking about you.
For sure.
So yeah, just focus on your relationship with God and getting right with that, and then the rest will take care of itself. Cool, cool. So we've got some precedent here, right? So we've got this understanding that, okay, well, as from the earliest times of Scripture, there is this understanding that God is not a passive God, right? He's not the clockmaker that just, sets the clock and falls asleep. It's like, no, he is awake and pervasive in every single aspect of our lives. And sometimes he interacts with us through messengers, right? And through prophets and through people. And other times and angels and stuff and events, and other times he's, like, actually there. And you
Right.
have to reckon with that, right? So it's not so strange to now think that, okay, well, if God, if through the Catholic and the Orthodox framework you have this understanding that God becomes present in in front of you, right? Then you should want to. Like who else are you going to dress up for? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, God cares about the heart. God cares
Right.
about the heart for sure, but at the same time, the outside should be a reflection of the inside.
Right.
And
Right.
that's probably the paradigm we should go by
Right.
when we just discern how to dress up for mass. Well, how should we what should we wear? Like, is that a proper way to dress? Yeah, God definitely cares about your heart, and He knows you better than you know yourself. At the same time, you wouldn't go to meet, the president or the queen or the king or whoever
Right.
just dressed up in a t-shirt and shorts, right?
Right, right. That was
So
actually the
it's
case. That was actually the case that I made. I had this conversation not too long ago with someone from our group where I was it was exactly this kind of related conversation to mass and stuff and understandably so. He was from Spain and he was said he's like, "Oh, like I really don't like this in Spanish you have this hang up where it's like ¿qué dirán?" You know, like
mm,
¿qué dirán? Like what are they gonna say? Like people dress up nicely because if you don't, then like, oh God, what are they gonna say? I showed up to mass in slacks. And he in his nature was kind of like he's like, F what people say. He's like, I don't care what people say, so like it's kind of like he
mm,
he did it in this stance. And my response to him was exactly that. I was just kind of like, well, firstly, like, yes, okay, you're not dressing up for other people, right? Like you're dressing up because you're about to be in the presence of your Lord and Savior. But it's one of those things where like if you went to if the fact that he's from Spain and stuff is was perfect because I
mhm.
was able to say I was like if the king called you tomorrow, like guess what? They're not going to let you in the building until unless you're
Exactly,
much less in front of the king. They're not going to let you in the building like without you being, dressed to the nines. And so it's like if you are willing to submit yourself to these temporal earthly authorities, right? You'll go up and you'll just have to go to a job interview for something you don't even really want, right?
right,
Like, how are you not going to place yourself in a state, right, where you can be with the Lord? And moreover, the things that again, I want to stress this for people maybe thinking that I'm mincing words and that I'm thinking they're hearing, oh, he's just such a just a blockhead. Um, what I'm getting at is the fact that when I think that the idea of the framework that I'm trying to the mindset that I'm trying to introduce is that the reason that you dress the best is because you would not have that best if it were not for him.
for
So
sure.
it is a way of showing up and basically being like if I was struck down right now, I have the best things on me, which are just yours, you know?
Exactly.
So it's this constant like this cycle of giving. Again, giving in the way that Abel gave, where it's not from the leftovers, but giving him prime rib. So
Exactly. That's what we're talking about right here.
good, good. I wanted to circling back around to again to more talking about like the space, the actual kind of space itself. I think that there is this kind of let me see here. There is this understanding that th there's this idea that I think that you cannot you can't escape the the definition of space. So you are either in sacred space or you are in
Mm,
profane slash vulgar space. Of course, as we said, it doesn't have these connotations. Let's just call it
mhm,
neutral space.
mhm.
And and there is no way of being outside of it, partially because one of the things that imbues space, that saturates space, is the mythos, right? So like whatever like the society that you live in is a result of a constructive ideas. And so every we can see this, I think we can look at, for example, we can see Poland, right? We can see
Right.
Nazi Germany, right? We can see Poland, of course, during the Soviet occupation, right?
Right.
That's what I mean. We can see Germany and all of this stuff where you had you had these artificial mechanized ideologies that were very foreign to the organic mental understanding
Exactly.
of how people should go along, right? Because prior to the modern era, right, prior to the Enlightenment, um, the fact that man is religious is like a given, right?
Hmm.
It's like there are no societies that there are no societies that anthropologists have found that were atheist.
Exactly.
All were religious in some way, shape, or form.
The
And it
human
wasn't
being,
until yeah, go ahead.
the human being is by nature religious. The problem is when you exclude God, when you banish God from your life, don't worry, you're still going to worship something. You're still
Right,
going to worship something.
right. Right. That's exactly it. And so I think that was one of those that's one of those key reasons why I started this podcast, I'm sorry I want to curate this conversation because I think that we're now living in a time where I'll give you a perfect instance. So we were just talking about this priest that I was having, that over here right now we're having some trouble with. He part of the German synodal way and stuff. And I thought it was really funny the
Mm,
fact that we're kind of having this post mass like
mhm,
cafe and kuchen as they say here. And and he said, he's like, why don't we one of the things that I want to invite you to think about is why don't we think about how we can reach people that 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 don't believe themselves that they need God.
mhm,
And these are people that are usually like wealthy people, upper middle class
mhm,
people that are just like they're just living their lives. They're not like overtly harming anyone, and
mhm.
they don't think that they need the Lord, but like how could we reach them? And and I remember thinking to myself, I'm just like by preaching the gospel.
And that's pretty much
Like
the only way. I mean, that's
I
at that point, it's pretty much the only way. The thing is,
like
when a man becomes convinced he's his own God,
yeah,
like you really need a supernatural intervention,
yeah,
or
yeah,
something really mm, just you need a life-altering event
yeah.
to take him out of this state.
Right, right, right. But it's one of those things where I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, the Lord said so himself, like he spoke. Obviously, we don't take the parable of the rich man and
Hmm.
the eye of the needle literally, right? We understand that it's a hyperbole, but that is an example of him saying it's really hard. Like
Exactly.
if you're set, you you believe yourself to be set. You're like, oh, I'm set. Like I've got my house that I've always wanted, the car, the wife, the kids. It's like, what need where are you going to see God in that? You
Exactly.
know? And so like we understand the fact that of course there I haven't met someone who was so wealthy that they lacked problems or that
Hmm.
they were immune to being miserable. I haven't met that
Right.
person. So because no amount of money is gonna help you deal better with the death of a lost one of a loved one,
100%.
the psychological and emotional tolls that a disease, a chronic disease can take, mental health and mental instability, that the list goes on, right?
For sure.
No amount of money is gonna help you do that. And so it might create some temporary creature comforts, right? but it's
Mm,
not going to really kind of bring it home.
definitely.
And that's the difference. That's why I kind of laughed at it because I was just like, what if you just oh, wild idea. Well, why don't we just preach the gospel? You know, it's
Simple as
like
that.
what why it is what this is
Exactly.
by the way, this is the gospel that converted like Charlemagne, right? Like this is the gospel that like that went that this is the same gospel that the heathen kings heard
Right.
and that you know were whose hearts were eventually converted. Some obviously for the wrong reasons, but others actually believed it, you know.
Right.
The history of the church is not without we there are plenty of examples where kings did pilgrimages to Rome and went to the and crawled to the feet of the Holy Father as a sign of penance because of graces that they saw they needed to acquire, you know? So
For
there's
sure.
precedent. Yeah.
Definitely. Plus, there's money can serve as a great distraction from the fundamental and like the most existential questions one can ask themselves. And sooner or later, you will reflect upon your life. It's going to happen sooner or later. You will realize, you will become aware of your own mortality. And, what then?
Right. Right. We have this we have this this idea we were exploring this text which I can share called the sacred and the profane as part of preparation for this call and I think for a series of calls. I
Hmm.
mean it's a great text and we're not going to cover all of it now, but one of the ideas that comes up is that the sacred one of the delineating a really great analogy that it presents is that the sacred you can imagine the sacred space being like the gravity of the sun, right?
Right.
This orderly grab this literally what's called like this traditionally called the axis mundi, right? So
Axis
like
mundi.
the axis upon which the your existence gravitates around and
Right.
rotates, and the disjoint happens where you mistake yourself to be the sun, right? Like you mistake
Exactly.
yourself to be you're the axis mundi, everything revolves around you, and we all know people like that, right? We've all met those
For
people.
sure.
And it's interesting because what it presents, the idea which I think is very beautiful that it presents, is that when you are around sacred space, like for Catholics, like for the Orthodox, where it is to be in the Holy of Holies or in the sanctuary in front of the Blessed Sacrament, is that that is your axis mundi. And so if everything permeates from that space, there is something deeply mystical about our psychology where you kind of find your you can find your place, right? If you know
Exactly.
where the grace is coming from. Whereas in the profane space, they explained how it's kind of like when you are in space, like the actual outer space,
Hmm.
and there's such an expanse, right? That you can't see things like it's very difficult for you to get perspective of how large objects actually are, you know?
Exactly. Yet another interesting thing in this text was that what we are observing in our societies nowadays is that there there's a loss of sacred space on a societal level,
Hmm.
whereas
Hmm.
which back then was well much more visible and
Right,
much more obvious.
right,
Whereas while nowadays we all have our own little sacred spaces on a personal level, places which bring back memories, places which are simply special to us. However, we're observing the loss of sacred space on a societal level, especially in secularized societies.
right. Right, right. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that I mean just to beg the question, right? Because I can
Hmm.
imagine I imagine that a lot of people listening have also observed that, especially
Hmm.
more faith more people of faith. Like I know in our group, for sure, sometimes we're just like, why is this thusly?
Right. hmm Right. So, well, first of all, secularization has been a pretty big factor in all of it.
Right.
When culture stops being theocentric, rather it becomes humanocentric. That's the that's the first I would say stumbling block that occurs when the man becomes the center of the universe and not God.
Mm,
So that will inevitably move us towards that loss of sacred space, and will move us from the reality that's outside of us towards
right.
a more subjective reality. And well, basically, each person has their own sacred space, so to speak. Each person lives it on an individual level,
Right.
but there's a lack of um, there's a lack of sacred space on the level of a greater society,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So that's the
Right.
first thing. Uh, I guess another thing would be, well, I wouldn't say it's a direct cause, more so it contributed, but one of the things that come to mind is how nowadays we're just so surrounded, first of all, by information. Second of all, I would say popular culture is becoming more and more homogenized,
Mm, mm,
and that
hmm.
definitely contributes.
Hmm.
It's Whereas if we were to move back like 200 years, each place, each nation, each country had their own distinct culture and set of
Hmm.
ideas. Whereas nowadays, everything is becoming sort of one big wash.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's basically everything at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that also contributes to, I would say, the loss of the sacred space because everything's becoming so saturated and everything's becoming kind of the same. We're
Right.
blurring the lines more and
Right.
more.
Right.
And well, that's the reason why we're losing this sense of sacredness. Sacredness becomes more of an more of a subjective individual idea rather than a reality outside of ourselves.
Right. 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 I think it's that's a really good point, and to build off that, I think that one of the things that one of the things that I was thinking about that you as I was listening was that um partially circling back to the topic from before is that man does not cease to be religious just because he abandons religion,
Right.
right? And so there is religious behavior. We talked a bit earlier about, just as a recap, about how you will always worship something, even if you're not worshiping God, because of man, because of his man's inherent nature. And
Exactly.
part of this as this humanocentric anthropocentric kind of view is that you're just worshiping yourself,
I mean, heck, we're
right?
seeing it in totalitarian countries.
Right.
The cult of personality is one of the
Right.
examples of.
Bingo. Bingo.
of
Exactly.
right.
And then you have amazing things. You have amazing claims like in North Korea, like that the I mean, it's like that the great leader doesn't defecate. It's like it's stuff that is truly amazing. And so you wonder, so there is clearly, but even to move away from from the ridiculous into the more nuanced, right, within our own culture, is that again, you have the cults, the cults of money are still there, the cults of fame are still there, the cults of influence are still there. People are chasing that thing, that fix.
Exactly.
It was relieving. I recently saw a really great documentary called I think it was called Christ and the Gods. and it
Hmm.
was discussing how it was a look a few anthropologists and archaeologists and historians they went looking to see how is it that this how is it that the early Christians interacted with the rest of the Romanized world, right? Because it must have been very interesting. It's like you have excuse me, you have these Jews that come from the Middle East, but then they start to like grow in little communities and pockets in Rome, in Ephesus, in
Especially in
Thessalonia,
Alexandria.
Alexandria, exactly. And so and it's interesting because it's like what must this have been?
Hmm.
These are our ancestors, right? Like these are our ancestors, our spiritual ancestors for sure, and for some of us, our actual ancestors, right? For the Coptics,
Hmm.
for example, etc. It's like you have these early Christian communities, and you think to yourself, you're like, what must the Romans have been thinking? It's like, okay, but they're not Jewish, but they're not Roman, and they hang out with these guys, but they don't eat like those guys, right? Like it must have been
Right.
they
Hmm.
do believe in and like their god was the son of God, but it's not Zeus and it's their god, and so it's like it must have been so confusing for the Roman mind that was very like in the world and basically they took their way of life for granted, right?
Right.
And so but even then what's really fascinating is that even then back then there was still this understanding of sacred and profane, right? And there was
Totally.
still this understanding of like, okay, well, you don't I don't just offer sacrifice at my house. I have to go to the temple and offer
Mm.
sacrifice. And then now it's just again it's like the but no, but it's but if you have this a lot in the new age stuff, right? Where it's like, but if I'm the divine, if I'm the manifestation, then like wherever
Hmm.
I am, is where God is. And I'm kind of just like, well, yeah, but like in a way, but it's not in
Exactly.
this way that you're thinking. Like, so yeah, it's very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah. And Christians have been accused of some pretty terrible things by the Romans because of many misunderstandings. I mean, first of all, they were, out of all the possible things, they were actually accused of atheism because they refused to give offerings to Roman gods.
Right,
So, because Romans basically were like, yes, you can worship your God as long as you include him in our pantheon.
right,
And of course, the Christians weren't having it, and that's what provoked the Romans to persecute Christians. I mean, heck,
right.
Christians were accused of committing cannibalism because the body of Christ,
Of course. Yep.
eating the
Yep.
body of Christ, and yeah.
I don't. I think. I really encourage anybody listening to really, really, really look into early Christian history and really look into the specifically the lives of the fathers, the early fathers, the Greek fathers, Saint John Chrysostom, Saint Basil the Great, like a lot of these early fathers that were like not just their lives, but like what Christianity looked like in the world at that time and I want and I would love for people to this is one of the big reasons why I'm so why what's going on in Germany is beyond my understanding because I don't understand how people here how the people practicing this here don't understand that our faith is not meant to play rank and file with the authorities. Like that has
Exactly.
never been the case. The fact that there was always tension, even once Christianity became the official
Religion of the Roman
religion of
Empire
the empire, exactly.
under Theodosius.
Yeah, there was always tension, always tension. One of the reasons that we have the College of Cardinals is because that was a way for the Pope to keep that was a mechanism developed by the Pope to make sure that, and by the Church and the Pope specifically, to make sure that he could keep, uh, that he could that he could keep power that belonged to the Church within the Church and keep external power out. It was like it was
Exactly.
a firewall because it was because they realized, okay, well, no, listen, if Emperor so and so gets too comfy, then he's going to try to be like, okay, well, but you can adjust this for me, right? You know, again, it happens today. Why wouldn't
I
it
mean, that's how
happen
you end up with
2,000 years ago?
Caesaropapism.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Exactly it. And so, and again, of course, there are of course instances I appeal, like I'm constantly appealing. I'm just like, you don't have to go too far. You have the irony to me is that like you can go. What is one of the reasons that Luther broke off the church, or that he started the Reformation because of the corruption that was happening within the church.
Exactly.
Well, guess what? Part of the corruption that he was breaking out from was how cozy the church at the time was with the secular authorities.
Exactly.
And so in my mind, I'm like, how is it like what is the what,
I mean, you
what
didn't even have priests among cardinals at the time, so
that
that's how crazy it was.
that's what I mean. And I'm kind of just like, why? Yeah, of course, you had like the Cardinal nephews and stuff. Yeah.
Mm.
And so it's one of
Nepotism.
yeah, nepotism completely. You know, you probably, people that had no business making ecclesiastical decisions making those decisions, right? But what rattles my mind is the fact that the people here pushing this agenda, which is a mainly political, worldly agenda, it's like, isn't this the whole reason you guys started the Reformation to begin with?
Mm.
Like that's what gets me. It's like, how don't you see that you're just recreating the circumstances for the reason that the split happened in the first place?
Right.
I don't get it, dude. I'm not a genius here. I'm just thinking two, three steps ahead, which clearly people are just don't want to do. So, but in any case, bringing it back to this idea of again the sacred and the profane is that like which it does connect. It does connect because again it has to do with the fact that um if you are in this if your framework if your mindset if your attitude is that that I'm the sole arbiter, right? That I am that I'm the one having the subjective experience, that my subjective experience takes precedent over what's going on outside of me.
Mm.
Well, then there's no reason to reconcile what's outside of you with what's inside of you.
Exactly.
There's no reason, you know?
Uh, That's what when your subjective feelings, when your subjective all right, your feelings or convictions become the norm of your become your norm when they become your the source of your modus operandi. That's where we're running into we're running into this problem. That's where well, no wonder we're losing. We don't see this sacred space uh, at a societal level anymore because each one has their own, and it's all subjective.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we create here's a good question building off of the topic we kind of springed off from. Can we use this like again the raves and the concerts and the prayer and worship circles? Can we use those let's expand upon that a little bit, for
Mhm.
example.
Right,
Let's think about do those things count do those things count as worship? Like let's assume for a moment that they're really kosher, right? That they're really that they're
right.
let's assume that there's no drugs, there's no alcohol, it's people just
Mhm.
vibing to the music and like really kind of just being there for each other. Can we can one say this is how we worship?
Now we get into the topic of what it means to worship. If we were to look at it from an etymological standpoint, etymology of the word is to worship, to give someone or something their worthship,
Mm,
basically give to each what they are owed, what they deserve,
mm,
which is which partially well, which is connected to the virtue of justice, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I realized it some time ago, and yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Actually, as a side note,
Yeah, yeah. Take us there.
uh, religiosity is uh, serves as it's actually a sub virtue of the virtue of justice because
Mm,
what is the virtue of justice? Justice tells us to give to each what to give to each what they rightfully deserve.
mm.
So yes, uh, when we so and we have to go back to the Last Supper
Okay.
where Jesus, of course, he broke bread. He blessed it and said, "This is my body." Then he took the cup. He said, "This is my blood," and said, "Do this in remembrance of me." So there he instituted the Eucharist. He, it's basically God telling us this is the way you should do it.
Mm,
That's the proper way
mm.
to, that's basically a proper way to worship.
Right, right.
And that's And that's what the church has been holding on to for, well, since the beginning of Christianity. The sacrifice of the Mass is the proper way to give God worship, the perfect way
Mm,
to, and well, actually, the only like 100% correct and fulfilling way to worship God. While, for example, art and hymns and music about
mm.
God is in and of itself, is good and it is
Right,
pleasing to
right,
God, that's for sure.
right.
However, it does not fit the definition of worship in this sense.
Mm,
It is, I would say, it is an act of veneration. As I
mm,
said, it gives God honor, it gives God
mm,
praise. However, it does not fulfill that proper way to worship God. It is not uh, it is not giving God his due in a sense. Like, while it's good, it's pleasing, but it you can't substitute writing a religious song for going you can't substitute going to mass with writing a religious song or making a sculpture of the Virgin Mary or whatever.
right, right,
It's basically the extra stuff you do. First, you have to take care of what you ought to do, what
right,
are your obligations, and then you can do extra stuff.
right, right. Right. Why don't if you would be so kind, why don't you walk us through the difference between worship and veneration? Because I think for just for pe just to unpack it later for people, like if they
hmm
have maybe they might not have explored or unpacked the two things because
hmm
they're subtle, right? It's these subtle differences.
Right.
So why don't you walk us through
Well,
that, please?
right. We'd have to go to Latin, and there is a difference between cultus latriae and cultus duliae. Cultus latriae, or latria, is the praise that's given to God, that's owed only to God, uh, putting him first. Whereas dulia, or veneration, is the kind of praise given to the saints, for example. Well, in the case of Virgin Mary, because of her role in the history of salvation, the fact that she was the mother of God, I would say not that I would say, as the church saying it,
Okay.
hyperdulia,
Yeah, yeah.
hyperdulia applies to the Virgin Mary because of her special role and her sanctity and all that good stuff, to
Yeah.
put it simply.
Yeah.
Dulia is a kind of praise or veneration we give to saints to honor them, to just let's say how you would honor your parents, for example, and treat them with respect. Uh, well, but you don't put them in the place of God. You wouldn't put
Right.
them on the same level as God. You wouldn't deify them.
Right.
And that's the main difference. Worship would fall under the latria, category, and veneration would fall under the dulia category.
Okay.
That's I'd say probably the most concise distinction I could give
Got it.
this moment.
Thank you very much. No, it's very I think for the listeners, I think they'll appreciate that. I know I appreciate that. It's also it makes me think about how why it's why you really can't take the you really can't just take this is why we are
Also,
Catholic and or
I would like to
yeah
interject for a
yeah
second
yeah
right
oh
there.
sure
I
sure
actually, and that's once again when it comes to the matters of worship.
right
When, for example, when Protestants accuse us of worshiping Mary, well, we don't offer masses to Mary.
right exactly
So,
yeah
yes, the Catholic Mass or the Divine Liturgy and the Eastern rites, this is the proper way and the only true, like 100% full-on way to give God worship, like actual God, to give God his worship.
right.
Whereas everything else falls under the veneration category or praise or,
Right. No, and definitely. I mean, we offer, there are vigils and there are masses where there are masses where the saints are again. Correct me if I'm wrong in this, but like or imprecise, but like the masses are offered in the honor of like a particular saint, right? Of a
Mhm.
particular feast of the Blessed Mother or of the saint.
Right,
But the mass isn't offered to the saint. The mass is offered
exactly,
to God for the merits of the saint, usually acquired by the saint. And even then, the saint, the reason that he or she is the saint is because they were always leading us back to God, right? So that's the thing.
right,
We don't worship any terrestrial being. We don't any one of we don't worship each other, right? We worship God, and we venerate those that bring us. We venerate those that spent their whole lives and then sometimes gave their lives to bring us
exactly.
closer to the Lord, right? That's that big difference. Yeah.
Well, I would say I well, every nation has its heroes, and many a times they might even have there might even be a national holiday, on the day of their birth, or a certain historical event they were a part of. There might be statues of that person in a country. That doesn't mean they are worth worshipped. That doesn't mean they are given a praise that's owed to God. Rather, we celebrate their contributions. We give them their honor,
Right.
but we don't put them in a place of God.
Right. Right. Which is diametrically again, that's one of those things where it's very important to know that distinction because if you look at it could have one of the things that I always remember is that like it could have become that, right? Like
Easily.
Christianity was born in a pool, in a cultural pool, in which it was very common to deify people. Like it was
Oh,
very,
for
very
sure.
common. So we could like having that element could have deifying the saints and could have very easily and very quickly become part of the everyday Catholic practice. And yet it wasn't, right? There's that deep nuance. So it's important to kind
And
of
hey,
make that distinction. Yeah.
when we look at many pagan cultures, for example, the ruler was considered the son of God,
Sure.
for
Yeah.
example. So
Absolutely.
that's
Absolutely. I
one
mean,
example of the
yeah,
examples.
absolutely. It was
Or
very common for
or
Caesar
one
himself.
of
Yeah.
the gods.
Right. Absolutely. We have a few questions. So if you're interested, we can actually dive
Let's
into it. That'd
go.
be cool.
Let's
So we've
go.
got we've got so it says someone's here is saying, does offering sacrifice have anything to do with the distinction between veneration and worship?
100%. The sacrifice of the Mass is, well, that's where the worship lies
Mm,
in the Catholic worship once again. The sacrifice of the Mass is the true, as I said, the most perfect way of worshiping God, and in all honesty, the only true way of giving God worship. As I said, everything else would fall under the veneration category.
got it. We have a here. is a friend of mine from a Jewish friend is chiming in
Hmm.
and saying, in Judaism, God exists in our world, but his gifts and his presence move farther away from us as humanity moves towards wickedness. So it makes sense. I mean, I think I would say, yeah, if you have it, I would say that definitely we have the same understanding
Hmm.
in the sense that it's even reflected in art, right? Like in the famous painting by Michelangelo, God's finger is fully extended towards Adam,
Hmm.
whereas Adam's finger is only like, I'm tired. Yeah, and so it's one of those things where he's constantly extended towards us, constantly
Exactly.
seeking us, but we're the ones that have to, come to him, and
Hmm.
so yeah, the closer we move as we move towards wickedness, yeah, that's kind of what happens.
God always reaches towards us. He always reaches towards us. His hand is always extended. Now what we do is whether we respond to God's calling. What be because we're all called by Him to a relationship. And now the ball is in our park. Do we respond to God's invitation, or do we reject it? And you're obviously free to do it. God does not force himself upon anyone.
Yeah,
I like to say God is a gentleman. He doesn't force himself upon anyone. He's always like, if you want to.
yeah,
And as I said, you can accept his love. Uh, you can reach out your hand as well, or you can reject him. The
yeah,
choice is yours.
yeah, absolutely. I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
Oh, for sure.
I think it's been really wonderful. I'm wondering. I'm very curious to see if any more questions come in, right?
Hmm.
Once we share this with our because we're just starting this out, but I'm having a load of
Hmm.
fun and I'm learning a lot, and I hope you are too as well. And I think that we're I'm very curious to see what our communities say about about this topic, because I'm trying to bring as many questions think from the devil's advocate point of view as much as
Hmm.
possible,
Sure.
because I think that right now specifically there's this deep need for the clarity
Oh, for sure.
in the faith. There's a lot going on right now. Even from Rome, right? There's a lot going on right now where I think people are looking for some clarity,
Mm,
and
definitely.
it's nice to kind of talk things over, and then pull out the classics, right? Nothing like, yes, of course there's yes, of course there's nuance, and we have to seek, okay, what is the way that the church and us as people, as members of the church, how is the church going to interact and reach out to and behave in this kind of a world? But remembering all the while that we are in the world yet not of the world, right?
Exactly.
So good stuff. I'm curious to see how it goes. Thank you so much, man, for coming along. It will not be the
My
last
pleasure.
time. I think
Definitely.
we'll secure another one for sure. And yeah. Well, oh, we got someone here saying
Mm.
there's a Christopher here saying I'm in as promised. Hope you guys are having a good discussion. God bless you. Cool. All right.
God
Awesome.
bless.
But yeah, man. So thank you very much for coming on. As I said, we'll be back for sure. But for the evening, I think we've covered a fair bit
Yeah.
amount. And yeah, God bless. Thank you everyone who tuned in and listened. God bless you, and stay safe. In the name of the Father and the Son, of the Holy Spirit.